if I could be kind of rude and lump your risk number 2 and risk number 1 together, I think it actually is kind of appropriate, if you will, Ian, because both of them are, in my opinion, kind of about values.
Yeah.
And it's about classical liberal values. You know, number 2 is we're looking at the risk of a closed Europe. And that, as you put it, that means what's in question is a Europe whole and free is facing an identity crisis. I take that to mean an identity crisis over its core liberal values. And risk number 1, you're looking at a hollow alliance where in the past, European-American relations have been glued together by explicit values of freedom and equality and human rights. It's even in our founding documents of Europe and the United States.
Yeah.
How do you see values standing up to these enormous challenges at the core of the sort of force of liberalism?
Well, and this is precisely why we wrote the report this way. You know, in a year where clearly, you know, China's whipsawing everybody and the Middle East is in flames, how could we start with these 2 risks that have nothing to do with those things? And it's precisely because the values of the world order that we have grown accustomed to living in for 3/4 of a century are now under a threat that is unprecedented over the course of that order. The weakness of European values and of the fabric that cohered what Europe actually means, much more concerning than the idea of a recession or a financial crisis. The fabric of the transatlantic relationship, which was the most important alliance and still has been for 75 years in the entire world, they are eroding in front of our eyes. And it's not that we don't like each other anymore, it's that that's just not where it's not our priority, it's not what we're paying attention to. It's an apple sitting on a tree that you can just watch dry and wither and doesn't have the importance, the luster, the significance that it has for all of these years. Where does that leave values? Where does that leave leadership? Where does that leave the world order? That is what underpins the most dangerous geopolitical environment that we've seen in decades. And so I think this was a year that you couldn't just jump in with China or ISIS or Saudi Arabia or Putin or any of those things. You had to actually take a step back because it's precisely the erosion of these values, of these ethics, that we've taken for granted. We've taken for granted a liberal international order that we didn't realize that allowed us to live the way we have around the world. And we assumed that, well, no, those things are that's just the way it is. But those are actually very significant political assumptions that we have been allowed to live within over the course of our lifetimes, and we will no longer be able to. It is the end of a transatlantic global order, and it's going to be experienced in 2016 in ways that it has never been since its crucible, its formation.